Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. All right, so we're on part 2 of this redraft project. And just to recap you guys, for if you haven't seen the first video or if you don't remember from the first video, what I am doing is redrafts of the 2020, 2021, 2023, and 2024 draft. Well, up to 2023, my bad, no 2024 draft. And these are all going to have continuity with each other, just to show you like how 4 years or 3 years of drafting different can dramatically change the makeup of the Browns roster. It's more of a thought experiment than it is a tool for criticism, so I'm not really doing this to be critical of the drafts that the Browns have had. I have already done thorough critiques on Andrew Berry's drafts with things I feel like are more relevant to judge him by. There's a video I did. It was a scientific review of Andrew Berry, an objective review of Andrew Berry. If you want to go check that out to see what my opinions are about the strengths and weaknesses of Andrew Berry, that's the video for that. This is not explicitly to criticize or to praise Andrew Berry. This is just a thought experiment that I thought would be fun because it's July and there's not a ton of news about the Browns. So, this is where we get a little bit more time to do some fun kind of thought experiment things that I don't get to do during the season. So that's what this is. Right? We're just having fun here. We're looking at the drafts. I'm also trying to be careful of like who the Browns brought in, bring in similar positions, all of that. So there's going to be like a consistent logic throughout here, right? I don't want to just say the Browns draft the best player in the draft because he went in the third round, in the first round. I want to keep these things pretty relative to each other. So if somebody wasn't selected within 32 selections of where the Browns were picking, I'm not going to jump them all the way up to the Browns, especially in the first 2 days of the draft. So all of that being said, let's get into it. If you don't know what I did in the 2020 redraft, I'll put those results on screen right now. And this is how it affected the starting lineup. Put that on screen. All right. So let's go into the 2021 redraft. Now, this one is interesting, right? Because the first 2 picks of this redraft, I don't think I'm going to touch. So first round, pick 26, I'm going to go Greg Newsome here. Now, is Greg Newsome the best player picked in that range? No. Could the Browns have done better than Greg Newsome at other positions? Yes. But if the Browns were trying to draft a corner, Greg Newsome was the best corner in the pick range available, right? Like within the next 30-odd people who got drafted, Greg Newsome's the best defensive back that they could have got. Could they got a safety? Sure, but they got a safety last year in the redraft, right? So if the Browns really wanted to upgrade the corner position, they wanted to use the 26th draft in the first round, Greg Newsome does make sense as that selection even to this day. He has held up, and I think his career has been better than all the other corners drafted around him. That being said, Greg Newsome still a very flawed player, and it sometimes just breaks like that, right? I don't think Greg does the greatest job of covering left to right. His durability is not what I would want it to be. He seems to miss time every year, but still a solid corner, right? Like if he's your third corner, which he is right now, you're not in a terrible place if you're the Cleveland Browns, right? And even if Greg is your second corner, I don't think that's a terrible place to be in. It's when Greg is your best corner is when there are problems that kind of arise there. Greg Newsome, if the Browns wanted a corner with that selection, and that was the selection to make, it's better than like Eric Stokes, who went after him. All right. So second round, pick 52. I'm not having the Browns adjust in the redraft. They take JOK here. Now, I don't think I really have to explain this. JOK was a phenomenal selection for the Cleveland Browns. It's one of Andrew Berry's best selections. I think you can argue it is Andrew Berry's best draft selection. 52nd pick. This guy was on track to be an All-Pro, on track to be a Pro Bowler. Unfortunately, had a neck injury. It seems to have derailed his career.
a significant portion. He missed almost half of last year, and he will miss all of this year. So there's no guarantee what he's going to look like coming back. But you got a really good player out of JOK. We could be cynical here and say, hey, you could have drafted somebody who's not as good, but could stay healthy longer. But JOK didn't get injured because he had some kind of underlying health issue. He got injured because he hit somebody in the wrong angle, was achieved, and that ended up having a horrific effect to the rest of his body, right? Like, it was chance of why JOK got injured. So who's to say this other player that you draft here doesn't unfortunately have the same issue that JOK had that has legitimately derailed his career, right? If this were a health issue or something like that JOK had that was genetic, I would be more open to that argument. But it was pure chance of why JOK got injured. You can argue maybe he was smaller. Like, I know somebody's going to make the argument that he was smaller, but most of the linebackers in that draft were pretty small that made it. And even, like, it's your neck, man. Like, being 6'5" don't really change shit for your neck. You know what I mean? Like, it's like your head and your neck. It don't matter how big you are. Like, you get hit in your head, you get hit in your neck, it's gonna be a problem. You can't out buff yourself out of hurting your neck or your head. Those are just always gonna be sensitive parts of your body. So don't really think that they could have really done anything else. Linebacker, you want a linebacker at 52. JOK was clearly the best choice for a linebacker at 52 in that draft. And again, it's the best selection Andrew Berry has made. And I applaud him for trading up to go get him. You know, I wanted JOK in the first round, right? So, like, getting him at pick 52, I was thrilled with. And given what JOK has looked like in his pro career, you know, I would say it was a pick that worked out for you. Unfortunately, he's hurt. So we'll see what he comes back as. But yeah, if he never had that freak injury, then, you know, he would clearly be one of the core players on this team. Next guy, which is all right. So third round, pick 91. The Browns originally selected Anthony Schwartz. Now, this is going to definitely be a pick where it gets changed. And this might be the most dramatic change, 1-to-1 change that you're going to see in this redraft. Because some of these redraft changes are like, oh, we drafted a guard here, but we did draft the center later. So let's get a center right now and then get the guard later because there's somebody in the range that would make sense. This one here is 1-to-1. Wide receiver for wide receiver, same wide receiver position. We're talking about two guys who are projected to play the X, right? Anthony Schwartz ended up being a Z more than the X because he doesn't have the developed route tree, but they would have preferred he be a X type receiver. They went Anthony Schwartz. In this redraft, they get Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, hey, look, this happens in drafts a lot more than people think, right? We tend to think the result of the draft tells us just how genius a team is with drafting. But you'd be surprised how often you'll hear stories from people who work in these front offices where they're like, yeah, we had three guys we wanted. One was Anthony Schwartz. The other one was Amon-Ra St. Brown. And Anthony Schwartz got drafted by Cleveland, so we went St. Brown, right? Like, that kind of stuff happens all the time. Where it's like one incredible bust was on the board for them, and then like one incredible player was on the board, and the team went with the bust because that was the guy they had ranked higher. It's never really, your team's never really that far away from making a big mistake. It's my point here. And who knows, right? I know the Browns, for example, taking David Njoku has heavily been rumored to be why the Steelers went with TJ Watt, because they were originally going to go David Njoku, but he wasn't there, right? Again, stuff like this happens all the time in the draft. We think that everybody has it figured out. Some GMs like players that are really, really good, and some GMs like players that are really, really bad, right, in the future. But it's gonna hit or miss at different rates. Anthony Schwartz, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, that's a huge difference right there. That's a huge difference right there. Now, look, I'm not going to say that I think the Browns should have done this back at that time because I wasn't out here pounding the table for Amon-Ra St. Brown back then. But this would be a huge difference for the Cleveland Browns. If they were able to, similar to how in the last draft, right, they get Antoine Winfield, it plugs that gap that they've had at free safety for the last 4 years. If they were able to hit on Amon-Ra St. Brown at this point, where they still have Jarvis Landry on the roster, they still have Odell Beckham on the roster, so they haven't hit a wide receiver shortage yet. It just changes a lot, right? It's a big deal for this team to have hit on Amon-Ra St. Brown. Remember, Anthony Schwartz got playing time every year that he was in Cleveland, so I would imagine Amon-Ra St. Brown would immediately get playing time on the Cleveland Browns. Now we go to our 4th round selections. Pick 110, the Browns originally took James Hudson. I have them taking Dan Moore, same position here, and a better player in Dan Moore than you got in James Hudson. Pick 4th round, pick 132. The Browns selected Tommy Togiai. Now remember, in the 2020 draft, they took a tight end, Harrison Bryant. I did not have them take a tight end in the redraft. So this is me drafting that need now in 2021 and getting Noah Gray at 132. 5th round, pick 153. They get Tony Fields again. They wanted a linebacker. Tony Fields is somewhat the best linebacker in that range, a solid special teamer and somebody who did contribute when you had injuries. So not a complete waste of a pick. And then 5th round, pick 169, where they originally got Richard LeCounte, right, who ended up playing safety for them. This is another massive upgrade. Taleno Hufanga, right? Now, you might not know this name, played on the San Francisco 49ers, is a hybrid free safety, does play a lot of strong safety. I think he's at his best when he has his nose closest to the football. And now you have Hufanga, who could be that strong safety for the future if he pans out the same way that he panned out in San Francisco. And then you have Antoine Winfield, who could be your free safety in the future. You're not thinking about safety anymore. You just drafted your corner, right, in Greg Newsome. You got Denzel Ward, so you're set at your corner positions. JOK holds down that linebacker spot for you. And you're sitting pretty here if you're the Cleveland Browns. Still have some upgrades that eventually need to be made if you're the Browns in this timeline, but sitting pretty here. pretty here if you're the Cleveland Browns. So that is the redraft. One more pick. 6th round, 211. They went Demetric Felton. They go Khalil Herbert in the redraft, which I think would be useful. Obviously a better running back than Demetric Felton. So that is the redraft. Let's look at how this redraft combined with the 2020 redraft starts to affect the starting lineup. All right, so the offensive side of this redraft is interesting, right? Because you're starting to see more and more names pop up from the redraft. Now, we know the offensive line is going to be pretty similar, worse. You drafted him last year. You put him immediately into the starting lineup, Joe Bitonio. And then at center, instead of it being J.C. Treader, Tyler Biadasz takes over. Now, Tyler Biadasz, starting center in the league, played for the Cowboys for a long time. He would hold down that position. And now if you're the Browns, 2 of your 5 offensive linemen are on cheap rookie deals throughout the 2020s instead of on expensive deals like you had to have for 4 of your 5 offensive linemen. So 2 of them on rookie deals, which is a much more comparable place to be at. You got Joe Bitonio, Wyatt Teller, Jack Conklin. And then you drafted Dan Moore as a backup tackle. So you even have options there if Jack Conklin gets hurt. Austin Hooper, David Njoku, Noah Gray are your tight ends. And then wide receivers where it gets interesting, right? Because there's going to be some turnover in the middle of the 2021 season. We have to imagine Odell Beckham still wants out of Cleveland at that point. We have to imagine that relationship breaks down in the way that it broke down in 2021. On top of the injuries that happened with Odell Beckham. And that leads you to this point to where you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jarvis Landry in the slot, and then Darnell Mooney as the Z receiver. which I think that's a perfect fit for him in this offense. Still have Chubb and Mayfield in the backfield, but you're seeing the impact of these redrafts start to crawl in here after just a couple of years. Imagine where we're going to be in 2 years or 3 years with the redraft project here. But that's St. Brown, Jarvis Landry, Tristan Wirfs, Tyler Biadasz. All of a sudden, this offensive makeup in 2021 is looking different. Now, does Baker Mayfield still destroy his labrum? Does Baker Mayfield and Kevin Stefanski, do they work together better than they originally did in 2021? Does Baker Mayfield take that step back that he took in 2021 still? With the offensive line like this, with options at wide receiver like this, it's debatable. It's debatable because a lot of what went wrong with Baker in 2021 while he was dealing with other stuff, on tape at least, appeared to be mental. So we'll see if the better offensive line helps him with that, right? Because I think a lot of people at the time especially credited the offensive line for his success in 2020, and the offensive line not being at that peak that it was in 2020 was part of the reason why people felt like Baker was not able to progress in 2022. And it has been a constant throughout Baker Mayfield's career. The better the offensive line, the better he plays. He's kind of reliant on a really good offensive line. But that's the conversation with Baker. Let's flip to the defense where we're starting to see the effects of the redraft creep in a little bit more, right? The defensive line, I think, was hit the hardest by the redraft. So Myles Garrett, Leki Fotu, who you drafted last year in the 2020 redraft, Malik Jefferson, they still bring in a veteran to start here, and then Jonathan Grenard starts at the other edge position other than Olivier Vernon. This would match up with what Grenard's timeline was in real life as well. He wasn't a year one starter, but year two, he did get a lot of playing time. So cheaper and more athletic defensive line. Remember, that 2021 defensive line was an absolute disaster. So having Fotu in there with Jefferson could prove to be an improvement. Well, it wasn't really 2021, my bad. 2022 was the disaster, and I think the Browns can make some selections in the next year that could change that disaster. Then you have Malcolm Smith, who was pretty good for the Browns when he was here, and then JOK. And then you have Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome, and remember, they brought in Troy Hill to play the slot in 2021. Did not work out. Probably won't work out again here. And then Ronnie Harrison and Antoine Winfield are holding down the safety positions, with Taleno Hufanga probably going to start in a year or two as they say goodbye to Ronnie Harrison. But that would be the 2021 defense. Now, this team, I believe, went about one game under 500 in 2021. Do you think this team has a chance to be over 500? Do you think that the offensive situation of this team changes because of the redraft? Do you think that makes a difference? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.